How can Christians stand up to the cancel culture in America? Especially when you have large corporations and even the banking industry shutting down Christians and conservatives. But there's hope in heroic Americans like Bethany Hamilton. Known for her comeback to competitive surfing after losing her arm in a shark attack, she has refused to ride the wave of the transgender agenda in sports. Welcome to Speak Up Virginia, equipping you to speak up on the life, family, and freedom issues that matter most to you. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candy Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Well, welcome, everyone. It's great to have you with us for Speak Up Virginia. You know, we talk a lot on this show about the cancel culture and how Christians are just really feeling like their ability to freely express their faith is being more and more canceled out. We kind of list the usual bad guys, you know, the federal government and DEI experts in education and the media industry. But I feel like, at least on our show, one of those things gets left off a lot, and it really should be covered, and that is the corporate world, the emergence of the new and scary woke corporate world.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that this is where Christians are feeling the heat. And I think if we had thought about this 10 years ago or whatever, you know, where are we going to feel the most discrimination and I don't think we would have named the private sector as being the place. I think we would have thought government, military, but actually it's these companies that are actually the ones that I think are doing the most censoring of Christians and conservatives.
Yeah. Well, just to get us in the mood for this whole topic today, I thought I would bring up this online controversy that's been happening recently over the new ad that Apple put out for its latest version of its iPad. And, you know, Apple put this out with a lot of fanfare, but I don't think that the ad sent the message that Apple was quite intending for it to send. You know, it is kind of creepy. I mean, the eyeballs are falling out, and I don't know what message exactly they were wanting us to get from this. What was your take from it when you saw it the first time?
I mean, I don't know if I thought creepy or just sad. Like, it just made me sad because they're in the picture, they're literally kind of crushing things that we love. Yes, things that the iPad can replace. And I get they were trying to put forward this notion of functionality. Like, we're going to be able to, you know, replace your camera, replace your, you know, your sources of music. But the bottom line is we love those things, and they're part of what makes it beautiful.
I don't know what they were thinking we were going to get from the crushing of the piano and all the art colors. And then, I mean, I don't know if we're all sad about the Cher record being smashed.
Okay, I personally not a fan. Music in general, though, you know, like hers, I could live without. But music is sad. And I think they really actually, I mean, I think that it was the worst things to crush, right? Like, they could have crushed some things that are just functional in our lives that we don't use anymore, but they crushed things that are attached to our soul. I mean, music and beauty, and they missed the mark big time.
I mean, the only thing I can figure out is that they were trying to get across the idea that all these things are going to now be all encompassed in this little thin iPad. That's the only thing I can figure out.
Yeah, but it's okay, but that thing is not beautiful. It does not stir the soul. It is just a device that functions. But what's ironic is, okay, this ad is called Crush, which and it went viral, and people basically reacted in mocking it and portraying the tech industry as actually crushing humanity, which is how it felt. That's exactly how it hit me. And I think it's getting a lot of backlash from a lot of the creative types, and then even, you know, I loved one of the X posts that Hugh Grant made. I think it summed it up really well. He said, quote, it represents the destruction of the human experience. That's what I think it's showing.
Yeah, it's funny to see people that, you know, are more going to fall more on the left side because they're artistic and creative. They're all upset about this.
Yeah.
But as Christians, I just have to say it's kind of ironic because we've known for a long time that the tech industry has been crushing literally our free speech. And we're going to talk about that today. But before we delve into that in a more detailed manner, I did want to talk about that there's been another sort of Bud Light transgender moment in the sports world. And this has been going on for a while, but it hasn't really been covered in a big way in the media, and we really haven't addressed it much. And so I wanted to talk about it because it has to do with the speaker that we have for this year's gala.
Yeah, I'm super excited. We finally can announce that on September 28th for this year's gala, we are going to have Bethany Hamilton. And Bethany Hamilton, most folks know her from years ago. She was the well-known teen surfer who was a competitive surfer and who experienced this terrible situation where she had a shark bite and she actually lost her arm. And that's how people know her, and they know the movie Soul Surfer. And she's been a wonderful, powerful woman of faith since then. But as of late, we've actually had her stepping into speaking out on girls' sports.
Yeah. And, it's hard to believe because we all remember her, when this happened to her, I think she was 13 years old. So a lot of us remember that, but now she's a mom.
Yeah, it's been a few years.
Yeah. She has, I think, 4 kids, and the latest one that was born, I think just last summer, was her first girl. So I think that's been part of her waking up to this issue and just it resonating with her because she wants her little girl, when she grows up and decides what sport she might want to compete in, to have a fair opportunity to compete, to have these opportunities that Bethany has had. And so I think, that hit at a personal level. And, so she has been courageously speaking out about, why it's not right for biological men to compete in women's sports. So we're just going to hear this clip from her on that real quick.
Bethany Hamilton joins me now. Bethany, we don't have to get into the rip curl controversy, but I've been a huge admirer of yours for so many years. You've overcome losing your arm and all the challenges that went along with that. So what do you say to leading athletic organizations that feel compelled to permit biological men to compete in everything from surfing to swimming, cycling, even weightlifting?
I feel like society is kind of like losing its grip on like the physical strength differences because it's very clear and it just seems so wrong and so unfair. And as a mother now of a daughter, I had a daughter last year. I have 3 boys and a girl. I want my daughter to have all the chance that she can in whatever sport she may do. And so she definitely motivates me to be like, hey, people, like, what the heck is going on here?
Reality.
And
yeah, well,
I just stand for...
Yeah, Bethany, I'm sorry, let's talk about the reality of surfing and what you need to be excellent. I mean, a top surfer, the type of athleticism, balance, upper body strength, and why do men and women in that arena differ?
Yeah, it's quite a bit a big difference still and always will be, I think. You look at big wave surfing in particular, like men can just paddle into waves so much faster, so much stronger, so much more with just like this beast mode approach. And like girls are pushing themselves, and I'm so proud of this current generation. There's so many young girls shredding so hard and pushing female surfing, and it's just so cool to see and be a part of. But it's never, that gap is never going to be, completely bridged. So
I mean, it's a biological difference.
Should it be?
Right?
We're women.
Yeah.
Let's like rock our womanhood and let girls do their thing and let guys do their thing. And you can admire both, but there has to be a line in the sand,
Okay, here's the interesting thing about all this. Bethany is not your typical political type that just likes jumping into the fray for the fun of it, at least in the political world. We know she's really brave with the surf. But I don't think she's the type that sees politics as fun in any way. She's usually out there talking about the grace of God and trying to help young people strengthen their faith. And so this was kind of a new area for her to dive into. And like I was saying, I think it's because she felt compelled to speak because of her love of the Lord and because of her love that grows out of that for other people. I think she has a genuine heart for women and these female competitors that are now going to be up against, someone that they probably don't have much of a chance of winning against. So she is trying to love other people by speaking into this. But she is paying the price for that because she finds herself now square in the middle of the cancel culture.
Yeah, unfortunately, when she began to speak out, she then received the fact that she's been dropped by her major sponsor. So Rip Curl had been her sponsor since she was literally that incident. You can actually look at the pictures of her right after that happened, and she's standing there with her surfboard, and it's Rip Curl. And they dropped her as a result of her, basically going out and speaking on this stuff. And so all that to say, the context, just to help people understand, is that the World Surf League basically made a decision of late to bring men and allow them to compete in women's competitions. And so I think she felt like she had to say something.
Yeah. Well, I heard her explain in one of the interviews that they actually had female athletes sign a non-disparagement agreement before this announcement. And so now you have this situation where a lot of those women, they really can't, these young girls, they can't speak out. It really would. It could just trash their career. So she is doing something courageous, risking that herself to speak out on their behalf.
Well, and there's a real cost. So an example that I've heard her mention is now what's happened is, so apparently at some of these surfing events, this is not my arena of expertise, but apparently there are surfing events where you actually surf in honor of someone and you put someone's name on your on your surf outfit, and literally they will not allow her name now to be on the back of these young girls. This is supposed to be somebody you idolize or somebody that you look up to, and they can't even have her name on it. I mean, she's being erased from the sport.
I think that is so ironic that you would literally be erasing a woman's name from, and these are women that are requesting to honor her.
Yeah, this isn't their choice. These are the actual surf girls themselves saying, this is who I want to look up to, or for whatever reason. So this has been this thing where I think really people just don't realize that you can actually, that men entering women's sports literally removes other women from the sport. And I mean, she is still a competitive surfer. This isn't just something she did when she was a teen. Yeah. She is still competing in surf competitions.
She is a national champion and probably one of the most, if not the most famous world surfer.
Oh, think about this. She said in one of her interviews that she was back on a surfboard 26 days after being bitten by a shark. I don't think anybody can fathom what that is. And she said it's because for her, that's like driving a car. You don't get in a car accident and you stop driving. She basically said, of course I was going to keep surfing. That's who I am.
Yeah.
And so think about that.
Yeah.
It's just tragic all the way around. So basically Rip Curl dropped her, and what we have to kind of add to that, what has actually happened now is they then decided to advertise with a transgender individual, a male who was identifying as a female, and that sort of, I don't know if you can literally say replace Bethany, but that became their advertising.
Well, it's just, it wasn't that long
after
what they dropped her, and now all of a sudden they're promoting a biological male as a transgender woman on their social media for their brand.
I mean, the good news is there was huge backlash. So I'm thrilled to say that that the surf community did kind of rise up and say this is not good.
This really did become their Bud Light moment.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to throw up some images up here just from what they were promoting and people's reaction, and it did kind of feel like deja vu.
Well, I think if you see the contrast, it's like, at one point in time, Rip Curl would have had Bethany Hamilton up there, and now at this point in time, they have a male, and it just is disappointing because people know that what this means is that there are women that will no longer get their championships. I mean,
because he had competed and won in other.
Yeah, he had competed in male sports prior to this,
right.
So it isn't. Again, this is just this constant thing of, we are changing the sport, the entire competition level for women. And I think people realize that, and I'm glad that they got some backlash. This is, to your point, this is kind of like a Bud Light, or when Target took some heat. I mean, I think I'm glad to see there's reaction.
All right. Well, they did take the heat because, they ended up putting out somewhat of an apology, which we're also going to put up here on the screen. But they actually ended up removing the post of the transgender person that they were celebrating, but I haven't seen any movement as far as I know toward bringing
Bethany back.
Yeah, trying to.
I wonder if she'd go back now. I don't know. Who knows?
Well, what is your takeaway of all this? As far as we are seeing the woke stuff going on, women being erased, but there's the pushback at the same time. And Target and Bud Light, they lost millions, if not even more than that, right? It was a huge hit. I think their stock fell, right? So what's your overall takeaway with all that?
I'm just glad there is pushback, because I think for a while it was like you had to go along and get along, and everybody was pretty quiet when the stuff first started creeping in. And so I think it is good that these companies are realizing people aren't all on board with this, and we don't want this all constantly put in our faces that we're supposed to adopt men into our sports and other related things. I think it's very good, and I think people need to push back. And I'm glad that even in the surfing community, because you think of surfing as the left coast, right? Like I think of surfing as like it's a California thing, and Californians aren't really, so I'm glad that there's pushback in all sorts of arenas. This isn't just the deep South saying we don't.
Yeah. And this is why it's so important for us to come alongside people like Bethany that do speak up, because they are doing it at a cost. And along those lines, I'll just mention, if you look at some of the social media smears on her, I mean, you see the usual that she's a bigot or intolerant for, taking her biblical stance on this. But what you notice is it's not the Christian surfer that's the intolerant one. And just as a case in point, tell us about this whole library controversy.
Yeah, I mean, she found herself in one of these examples of the left reacting to simply her existence. So a lot of folks know Kirk Cameron does these events. They're brave book readings, I think he calls them. But basically, he's partnering with someone.
Yeah,
and
it's a brave book company. He's partnering with them.
Yeah, he's partnering with someone who then comes and so basically he partnered with Bethany Hamilton. She came and read her book, and her book, she's got a children's book called Surfing Past Fear. And so they had this event. The books always have great character virtue and those kind of things for kids. And so it's like a great event. And of course, protesters showed up. And I mean, this is just the frustrating thing. And honestly, apparently it was bad enough that even the Brave Book CEO acknowledged that they were like worse than protesters at other ones of their events. Because I'm sure Kirk Cameron's been protested too, I'm sure, just for doing the right thing.
We had the drag queen story hours.
Right.
And Kirk Cameron's out there.
Why don't we have
good people reading virtues to children?
Right.
Right. And so then we have these protests.
And in this case, it was, obviously against Bethany on the transgender issue. And so, I mean, in particular, I think one of the protesters was noted as just how particularly unkind this is. So there was an individual that showed up with a transgender flag around them, but also holding a stuffed shark, which it's almost mocking her injury.
It is.
I mean,
I think it is mocking a trauma that she experienced.
I just, the idea that somebody doesn't just get to the issues. This gets back to where our culture is in general. We're no longer just saying we disagree on ideas.
Yeah.
We're going at people. We're going at them personally. Like they're coming at even her traumatic experience, which just it tells you everything you need to know about what's in the heart of somebody that does that. But
this is a woman reading a book to kids about how to overcome fear.
Which she has modeled in her own life so beautifully.
Well, Riley Gaines was there too, because she had a book she was also reading, and she was having none of that. So you can see here, that we're going to put on the screen. She called it out for what it was, cruelty in the name of tolerance. So
and I think everybody would love to have Riley Gaines on your side. She's a great one to step up because she's so, I think, strong in what she says.
Well, talk to us about why you wanted Bethany to come out for our gala. And by the way, I know we've been saying gala in two different ways, so we can have a debate about gala versus gala later if you want to write in on your opinion on the way it should be said. But I'm on
and
the
is
galas.
there a difference between the events and the apples? I don't know.
Oh
anyway,
my goodness, we're going down.
Anyway,
so what I want to know is, why was it important for you to have her? What do you want people to gain from her? And just speak to that for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are familiar. We typically bring in elected officials and politicians and those kind of folks at our events. But in this case, it's such a beautiful example of how you have I don't want to say an everyday mom, because she's certainly not just an everyday mom, but you have someone who is not aiming to be in the limelight for these issues. She's not. She wasn't trying to get political, but the reality is these issues come into our lives. It's like we're constantly being bombarded by the left. And in her case, she just wanted to compete in her sport and be a mom. And here it is, men have entered. And so she did the right thing in that moment, which is, I got to step up. I got to speak out. I've got to stand against this because it's the right thing to do. And I think most people in their lives, that's how this is going to play out. You're going around doing whatever it is you do, and this left-wing ideology enters your space. And what are you going to do? And are you willing to pay a cost? And she was willing to step up and say, I've got to do the right thing, even if, and I don't know if she envisioned that eventually she wouldn't be working with Rip Curl anymore, and that she'd have
not competing in the World Surf League.
I doubt she envisioned she'd have protesters at a book reading. I mean, all these things kind of play out. But I think the way that she expresses her ideas is just so natural. It's so, she's not, it's just a very different approach.
I'll call it down to earth.
Down to
Yeah,
earth.
it's
She's
just-
very in a surfer type
Yeah,
way.
cool surfer way.
I'm not used to sort of that kind of lingo, and so when you hear her talk, it'll be, you'll be a little bit like entering into if we all lived in California and sat on the beach.
Or Hawaii. She grew up in Hawaii.
Yeah, maybe it's Hawaii. I'm just thinking in terms of like, out there. But I think that we need to honor that, and also, I just think that there's a relatability there. So we want to hold up these heroes, and we want to be hearing their stories to be ready for when, unfortunately, this is our daughter that's trying to compete and they're bringing a boy in our high school kids, track meet or whatever. I just think we can learn.
And she has shown that kind of resilience that we saw earlier.
Right.
In
And
her
I think
life.
there's a spiritual component for her, which I think we can all benefit from.
I was just going to point out that, even though she got dropped from these other things, instead of, going into depression about that or whatever, she kind of just turned that around and started getting involved with these pro-family, pro-life companies. One's called Every Life.
Yeah, and Public Square.
Yeah.
I think she has really taken this is what I believe, and I'm going to try to align where I put my energies and where she uses her. She has celebrity status. I mean, that's just the reality, and she is using it for good.
Yeah. This is kind of a random thought, but it reminds me of Duck Dynasty when they got some of just the cred that they got, and they also turned it for sharing the gospel. And so it's encouraging when we see that. So I do just want to encourage all of you guys to come out for the gala. Definitely you want to come out, stand alongside Bethany, hear her perspective on this. She's going to share about it personally. So mark your calendar, September 28th. And I do encourage you, this is a great event to reach out to the young moms in your life, the students in your life, the young single women. It would be great to reach that next generation that really are going to be the power women of our generation, raising up the kids that are going to lead in this culture. So I think this would be an important message for them. And so just again, a shout out, go to the gala banner you'll see. I think the theme is unwavering faith.
Yes, unwavering faith.
So you'll see that, the banner, just click on that. It's familyfoundation.org. That's familyfoundation.org. You can register right now. We mentioned the cancel culture and how we're experiencing this in the corporate world in a general way, but I do want to spend a little time talking about how we are seeing a broad expansion of that goes way beyond the sports world.
Yeah, I think actually the banking industry is one of the biggest concerns we're seeing, or the most alarming area that we've seen. And it's frightening because the banking industry affects everyone's lives. Surfing, maybe not. Banking, definitely. And so folks might remember when U.S. Ambassador Sam Brownback actually started a religious freedom organization, and that organization was abruptly debanked by Chase Bank. They basically said, no, we're not going to have you here. So I thought maybe folks could just listen to a clip of what he has to say about that.
So walk us through what happened here.
Well, we started the National Committee for Religious Freedom earlier this year. We opened a bank account with Chase Bank and put funds in it. And then we just started the process of building the organization up, a brand new organization. And we find out less than 6 weeks in it, we go to make another deposit in it. And they said, your bank account's been canceled. We'll be sending you back your funds. That's it. And we're stunned. We're kind of, well, why? What happened? And repeated efforts to contact people we were told, well, the decision was made at corporate level. It's secret. We're not going to tell you about it, and it's irrevocable.
And I think when you think about Sam Brownback's organization, they aren't just a right-wing Republican kind of thing. They actually have all different faiths. So people need to be really concerned when something like that gets debanked. And that bank didn't just debank them. They also canceled our sister organization in Arkansas. So I think people need to be aware you can be doing a lot of different things, be a different kind of organization, and then there's more than one bank. So I also want to mention that in our sister organization's case, it was Chase, and they did actually hurt their ability to receive donations through the credit card processing. But, for example, just in April, 15 state attorneys generals wrote a letter aiming at Bank of America because they were seeing a trend of this political decision-making around banking with them. And in their case, they actually noted a one of the accounts that was canceled was a Tennessee ministry that does orphan work in Uganda.
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy. Now, they apparently referenced a pretty pro-marriage position on their, website.
They had a pro-life stance, or at least, I mean, they're Christians, so they talked about their
Christian things.
Yeah,
right. They're Christian
being
ministry,
pro-life and man-woman marriage on their website.
And but they're not even in the political fight. I mean, they're not
No.
even doing things that affect these issues in a political way. So that's disturbing. And then, of course, people probably know that Wells Fargo has been debanking gun shops. So that's a whole nother area.
Yeah, and I'll just mention, I think in kind of a behind the scenes area, people need to understand kind of these systems that support nonprofit ministries, like the credit card processing that you mentioned that's essential for donations coming in. And we experienced that with our donor database. We got kicked off a major database platform. That was a big expense for us because of our stance.
Yeah, we don't even have time to get into all the tech companies that are, but people know maybe some of the stories out of Eventbrite is a big one. These they're called CRMs, these constituent databases.
Yeah.
These are a major problem. Amazon, Google, we've heard about some of these. So,
I mean, that is a way of getting canceled when you take people's support systems and blacklist them from being able to use those. And I just want to put this in a larger perspective because I thought Alliance Defending Freedom made a great point on this whole banking issue. We just listed 3 of the top banks in the country, but they pointed out that when you look at the top 6 banks combined, holding over 50% of the country's domestic deposits. That's just 6 banks, over 50% of the country's domestic deposits. That is some serious power to cancel people out.
Yeah, and I want to flag here for people that you mentioned Alliance Defending Freedom. There are groups that will help with this legally, them, and also like we have our Founding Freedoms Law Center. If people actually run into these problems, we need to be able to address them legally. And then I also want to point out what Alliance Defending Freedom has done that's been really helpful, not just on the legal side, but actually they created this, I think they call it their Viewpoint Diversity Index. And what that is it's like a survey of these companies to find out, are they actually viewpoint diverse? Now, sometimes we hear diversity and we think, oh, that's a left-wing thing. No. The problem is these groups claim to be tolerant, right? Like they're all on this, but they actually aren't tolerant of all viewpoints, like viewpoints that a Christian might hold.
See, I think that's brilliant. The whole concept of viewpoint diversity is really great for holding these companies accountable because part of the problem is that a light isn't being shined on it. When we heard Senator Brownback speak, he talked about how when this happened to him, he started speaking out about it and people were coming out of the woodwork saying, oh, this happened to me, but they're silent about it.
Yeah.
So I think this is a way to help shine that light. And it's interesting. I think they've done it 2 years in a row now. It's basically scoring the companies on their respect for free speech and religious freedom. They do it very scientifically. They have all of these performance indicators. It's done very thoroughly. But you probably won't be surprised to learn that companies like Amazon and Microsoft, Google, they aren't scoring so hot on this.
Yeah, I mean, there were some that were surprising to me. I saw Airbnb on the list not doing that great, and I never thought about that company one way or the other, but, places you stay is pretty important. And then also, I am pleased to see that there has been some improvement. I noticed some improvement on Fidelity. That's a big one. A lot of our supporters have in trust. They put a trust together through Fidelity. Fidelity actually distributes that, so you get very nervous, as a ministry that depends on that as a conduit for donations. So that was good to see that they've improved. So,
all right. So just wrap up real quick. What can people do about this? Because it does feel pretty intimidating when we're talking about the little man against the banking industry.
Yeah. I mean, I think of one solution that we've just seen in the state of Tennessee, which we noted obviously had a problem with this with one of their ministries. They actually just led the country in the first ever bill dealing with debanking discrimination. And so they actually put forward legislation. Their governor has signed it, so it is now law that you can't do that. And they actually looped in insurance companies, which is another issue. I cannot tell you how hard we've experienced this, that people don't want to cover you in insurance because you do something that they don't like, or it could be controversial or whatever it might be. So this is a big deal. So I think states need to follow suit. We need to see that broadly across the United States at the federal level, because banking is very regulated at the federal level. But then also just people need to speak up. When it happens to them, we need to speak out. We need people... And mostly because it gives other people a heads up about which companies to use and to steer clear of if you have the possibility of running into these problems.
Yeah. So if you're running into this, first and foremost, speak up. We're behind you. You're not alone. As Victoria mentioned, we have the Founding Freedoms Law Center here to help. And, we are standing behind people like Bethany. So again, I'm just going to put one more plug in for the gala. An important part is coming out to support these people. So mark that on your calendar, September 28th. And I think with that, we'll just wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together, and help us get the word out by sharing our podcast playlist. We'll see you next time.